Hello, folks. My name is Colin DeVries. I'm president of the Deadline Club, which is the New York City chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. I'm here with Daniel Roberts, who is executive editor-in-chief of Decrypt, and we're here. This is our Deadline Club Café. It's Saturday, March 20th at 10 a.m. And we just kind of wanted to have a little bit of an informal chat, an opportunity for folks to get together and just sort of network and talk during the pandemic. So I invited Dan on. Dan's been a longtime board member of the Deadline Club, and he also took on this new role at Decrypt after many years in legacy media. And I have some questions, but I welcome anyone to chime in and add to the conversation. So to start, Dan, maybe just tell us quickly, give us like your elevator pitch on who you are, what you're up to.
Sure, Colin. And I should say that Colin's leadership at the Deadline Club has been great for many years. It's a great organization to be a part of. It's been great being involved in a group of like-minded people in the New York area that just believe in journalism and continue to want to see the industry thrive. I mean, we've all been through a lot, right? I've been on the board since 2013. Even in that time, we've seen the usual kind of cyclical nature of this business where companies do layoffs, then they rehire when they get more money, then there are layoffs. Digital media outlets try and innovate and change and be nimble, and then they go back to old ways and trying to wean ourselves off of banner ads and Google and Facebook, all of that. So we're all watching that together. And I'm glad that the Deadline Club has a strong community. Who am I? Let's see, a business journalist. I spent 5.5 years at Fortune, and then I spent the exact same amount of time, not by intention, but 5.5 years at Yahoo Finance. And then about a month ago left to join Decrypt. And I think, I've been covering cryptocurrency since 2011, not as my main beat, Colin, but as one of 2 or 3 main beats. And, that was early to it. I mean, Bitcoin came around in 2009. And even now, when it's been around 11 years, we're still early. There are a lot of people who are very deep in the space and they're into it and obsessed with it, but it's still very early days. It's still a new and nascent technology. We can talk about the price, we can talk about the adoption and the use cases, fine, but still early days. But what I really saw during the pandemic was the narratives kind of change. And if there was maybe a lot of dismissal of Bitcoin for years or skeptics, which there still are, I think more than ever it went mainstream due to a few things, right? First of all, the pandemic really strengthened the use case and the investment case for Bitcoin. The idea that when there's macro uncertainty and when the government is printing stimulus checks and when the Fed is pulling various levers, Bitcoin has a fixed capped supply. And so it has an appeal as a hedge against inflation, as digital gold. So you saw more people buy in than ever before. And the pandemic really fueled that. Then you also saw big public facing consumer companies, the kind of companies that in the past had stayed away, buying Bitcoin for their balance sheets and saying, we're going to accept crypto as payment. Tesla, Square, PayPal, companies that people know. And so all these things kind of converged at once. You also saw a lot of traditional Wall Street types who in the past had dismissed Bitcoin changing their tune. And again, I've covered this industry since 2011, and suddenly I more than ever, something I'd considered in the past, I more than ever thought now is the time. And that was to leave a kind of broad business news site to cover cryptocurrency full time. And I've seen more and more business journalists do that. And I think you will see more of that continue. So that's where I am now at Decrypt, which launched in 2018. It is a startup. So new for me after having been at, the print magazine halls of Time Inc. and then at Yahoo, which was owned by Verizon. It is a startup. It's been around since 2018. And our goal is cover the daily news in the space, but also educate people and teach them about cryptocurrency in a very inviting, friendly way.
Yeah, that's great. And I've explored the site. I wasn't familiar with it until you started working there, to be honest. So you got me interested in it. And yeah, there's a lot of great resources on how to learn about crypto, Bitcoin, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I think initially I wanted to know from you, like, what was the how did you first get interested in cryptocurrency? And you mentioned it came around in 2009. Was that when you first really got into it, or did you get into it later?
Yeah, I think I would tell you that, first of all, a lot of people who were early to it, who aren't techies, who aren't developers or engineers, their interest was just that it's a cool technology, right? There's something kind of exciting and thrilling about the tech, and it's cool to be covering it because the personalities in the space, the fact that it's new, the fact that it's on the bleeding edge. So to more precisely answer your question, Colin, I remember the first story I did, which was the first story anyone at Fortune did on crypto, was in 2011. And it was after Chuck Schumer and a couple other politicians had put out an official letter calling for someone to examine, I think it was both the Attorney General at the time, Obama's AG, and also the head of the Drug Enforcement Task Force, to examine Bitcoin because Gawker, rest in peace, had done a big story about the website Silk Road, where people were buying drugs and other illegal things paying in Bitcoin. And so that kind of put Bitcoin on the map, even though it had been over a year and a half or so that it was trading. And so we at fortune.com wanted to do a little post on, well, what is this thing? Is the government likely to shut it down? They might try to, but is it even possible to shut it down? And what was Silk Road? And the way we got in was that a local restaurant right near the Fortune offices had a sticker on its window saying that we accept Bitcoin, which you now see more and more. Although, again, I don't ever think that's really going to be the point, is, restaurants accepting Bitcoin. But that's how we got in. And I went and, spoke to the manager of the restaurant. Why are you accepting Bitcoin? And the answer at the time in 2011 was mostly just as a gimmick, to say, hey, look, we accept Bitcoin. Cool. But that was how I got into it, was being asked by Megan Barnett, who was the Fortune.com editor at the time, to write a post on it, explaining it for Fortune.
Yeah, that I remember those early discoveries of this cryptocurrency, like the Silk Road, like the dark web, and how people were buying drugs with it, and all there was all kinds of illicit activity going on around this cryptocurrency. But now, I mean, I'm jumping ahead in my questions. How far we've come since then, right? I mean, like now the chairman of the Federal Reserve is talking about it, as like something that can coexist with cash, which is just like, to me, again, that I don't know much about this stuff, but to me, like that, I don't even know what that means. How would what the practical impact of that is? And, well, I mean, do you want to?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you something about that. The Fed's talking about it. China's talking about a, state-owned digital currency. So a lot of people wonder if the government would create an official digital currency. All that is true, that it's gone mainstream. It's interesting. You say as cash. I mean, one of the biggest debates in this space still that I think is unresolved is if you look back at the original proposition, the original white paper, when it was created by someone, we don't know who, using a pseudonym, Satoshi Nakamoto. The title of the white paper was Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. And 11 years later, it really isn't being used that way. I mean, it's still not really cash. And in fact, people who try to dismiss it, they still love to say it's the go-to soundbite. Well, I can't use it to buy a cup of coffee in most places. Okay. Now on one hand, the uses of technology evolve and change. And right now, the way most people are using Bitcoin is purely as an investment, as a store of value. They buy it and hold on to it, and it accrues value. It's not really being used as cash. And as a result, some people think, me included, that cryptocurrency has kind of become a misnomer. I like to call cryptocurrencies just digital assets. They have different purposes, they have different use cases, but people aren't really using Bitcoin as everyday cash, and that's okay. But a lot of people say, well, then the whole point was a cash system, so has it already failed? A while back, I think maybe 6 months ago, James Surowiecki, who writes for The New Yorker, wrote a post that kind of went mini viral, and it said, Bitcoin has already failed because it was supposed to be cash, and we're not using it as cash. It's a fair point. I think it was a little excessive. It clearly hasn't failed. It peaked at 20,000 in 2018, then crashed. And now here we are 3 years later, and it's at 60,000. So it hasn't failed. It exists. I like to say, at the very least, it exists and it will continue to exist. But, there are questions about what is its use case really ultimately going to be.
Yeah. And I just want to pause quickly. I know we have some people who joined us. This is kind of an open conversation. So if anyone has any questions on this, or if you want to ask Dan anything, or anything at all, please take the opportunity.
Hi, Jessica.
And if you don't have any questions, I have plenty more we can go into.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, so I mean, just to get back to your career real quick, I mean, I have a ton of other crypto questions that we'll get into more. Hey, Jessica. Jessica's one of our rockstar board members on the Deadline Club. Welcome. So Dan, what led you to your decision? I think maybe you talked about it a little bit, but just to dig in there a little bit more, what led to your decision to move from legacy publications to Decrypt, which is a startup, like you said?
Yeah, I mean, it's new for me. And as we were alluding to, I also think so much has changed in digital media over the last few years. I mean, in some ways, so much has changed, but also in some ways things change and then they stay the same, right? I talked about the cyclical nature of this business. Boy, we've all seen the various moments that there have been, and then everyone kind of pulls back. The moments in which both digital-only publications and then print media outlets that finally understand they need to beef up their digital presence, the moments in which together they all embrace a certain thing, like the new. And then maybe a year or two later, suddenly it becomes clear, maybe that's not the best. Facebook instant articles, or papering your site in video ads that pop up and autoplay. And of course, as journalists, we want journalism to make money. I mean, I want people to pay for content. But then, another moment was everyone launching paywalls. And a lot of websites, I think, put up paywalls that didn't necessarily have enough of a devoted everyday audience to justify having a paywall. But again, at the same time, we want people to pay for content. I get that. So I think as things have evolved, there have been different things that everyone in digital media tried and hopped on board with. And then some of them started to look kind of foolish. Again, Facebook instant articles was a great example. Another one was video, right? Everyone thinking that everything now needs to be video. And part of that was maybe there were certain studies or outlets or professionals or leaders saying video is the thing now. All anyone wants to do is watch video. And I think over the years, what we really realized was actually people want to read and absorb news in whatever way they personally want to. Some people do love video. Some people have no interest in watching a video. Personally, when I just read news and I'm scrolling through my phone, I don't want to sit and watch a video. I want to read. Just give me the text. I mean, then you saw sites like Axios launch, where almost every single story they do, even when it's a feature, is in the form of bullet points. And it even now tells you, and our site does this too at the top, how long the read will be. This is a 6-minute read, or this is a 14-minute read. Well, that's long then. That's a feature. That's a long read. So point being, I think sometimes there have been boom and bust cycles where everyone was hopping on the latest thing. And then a few years passes and you see how it shakes out. So all that said, I was at a place like Fortune, which was a print publication, been around for decades and decades, respected, a prestige place that does terrific journalism, where if you write a feature that's going in the magazine, multiple editors are going to see it, have their hands in it, underline things with a red pen, and it's going to go through multiple edits, and it's very kind of precious and deliberate. And that's one way of doing things. And they still do a lot of their stories that way, and it goes in the print magazine. Fine. Then I went to Yahoo Finance, which was digital only, but in some ways also still an old media world type environment. And I don't mean that negatively. A newsroom with a large number of people where you're batting ideas back and forth, talking about stories, hustling, cranking to cover daily breaking news. That's great. And then, Yahoo Finance is one of the places that has also set up a huge video operation. I mean, every weekday from 9 to 5, they're live the entire time, back to back to back to back. It's basically a TV network, but it's online. And that's cool too. And a lot of websites have tried that. Bloomberg just recently beefed up its quick takes, which started out as short Twitter videos. Now they've got, kind of a live network that's on Twitter. Fine, Cheddar, another example. And then finally going to a place that's more of a nimble startup with a really small team of young reporters and editors that is completely decentralized. I mean, we are a global team at Decrypt. So that has been the newest thing for me, Colin. And, we kind of do it all. If we score an interview with someone who's a big enough name, we want to get video, because I believe it's kind of a waste not to get video if the person is a known enough name. If we're not doing video, almost everyone still asks permission and records audio of interviews. Then sometimes we're able to use the audio on our daily podcasts. Some tech stories are just a short breaking daily news story. Some stories are features that kind of move the puck further and add original reporting. We kind of do it all. And the biggest change has been, and I think part of this is pandemic fueled, but Decrypt long before the pandemic was a decentralized workplace, meaning, there wasn't one office, people didn't go in every day. We've got people in London, we've got people in Mexico City, Paris, Hong Kong, and in the US, we have, West Coast, California, Texas, New York now, Reno, Nevada. We've got people all over. And I think, to me, the most fascinating business question moving forward after the pandemic is going to be, what is the future of the office, right? I think a lot of people just don't quite know when they're going to be asked to go back, whether they'll be asked or expected to go back 5 days a week ever again. But I also think some workplaces do hope that people will come back. I mean, I know Bloomberg is one of them. I think some people who kind of moved out to the middle of nowhere during the pandemic and thought this is going to last forever, they might be in for a rude awakening when their employer says, well, we'd expect you back in the office. It's going to be a hybrid model, right? Everything is going to be different. It's going to depend on the workplace. I keep mentioning Bloomberg in New York, but that's very much kind of a butts in seats kind of place. I know they're going to want people back, maybe not 5 days a week. For me, even once the pandemic is over and the coast is clear, so to speak, there still won't be an office I'm going to every day. That's it. We are a decentralized, global, scattered workplace. Distributed is often the word. And in that way, we kind of live our truth, right? We cover an industry that is decentralized tech, and our workplace is also decentralized. So I hope to still go into New York a few days a week for live in-person events once we're all able to do in-person events again. But it's interesting to me to now be at one of these places that already before the pandemic was doing this, because I think a lot of newsrooms are going to remain in a hybrid model, remote work, because remote work has worked so well. That said, I'm also a big believer in the power of the newsroom, the in-person newsroom, where you can talk to your colleagues about news of the day. So all that is just a long way of saying that going to a kind of startup with a smaller staff that's very nimble and fast and is also decentralized is very new for me. And it's been exciting, but also very different.
Yeah, no, it sounds I like how you said you're living your truth, because I was thinking the same thing. Like you're covering a decentralized market of digital currency, and you're also like a decentralized newsroom, which I think the mirror there is pretty interesting. So you have podcasts, you have video, you have features. As an editor in chief, that's a lot to juggle, right? And so what do you hope to really accomplish? Do you think, like, during your tenure at Decrypt? I'm not going to like do a performance evaluation or whatever, but do you have any big picture goals for Decrypt?
Sure. Well, as we started this call discussing, cryptocurrency and Bitcoin has gone very much mainstream, at least, or sort of, I like to say, at the very least, in the sense that more people than ever are curious, right? They've seen Bitcoin in the news for years. They knew that it's a thing that's out there, but they didn't know much about it. Now, maybe they're seeing it probably more frequently. They're seeing that companies they know, and in some cases trust with their money, PayPal, Square, which, even if you don't know it, you've all used Square, the white fob at the end of an iPad at a coffee shop, Tesla, which you've heard about, which is run by Elon Musk. They're adopting Bitcoin and embracing it. So, what does that mean? And I would also bet that more people than ever are now even seeing some of the other terms. Ethereum, well, what does that mean? So in many ways, although we are a daily news site and we cover the breaking news, and there's tons of it now every day in the industry, we also want to be a welcoming place for people to get their questions answered. It's a bleeding edge technology that can be very opaque and very confusing to people with a lot of tech terms and jargon. And we want to be a welcoming place for you to start your journey of crypto understanding, to dip a toe in the pool. So, one section that Decrypt has that I'm so impressed with, and we've been trying to rapidly grow and add to every few days, is our learn section. So it's sort of like, over here, we've got our news, but over here, we've got learn, which are these handy explainers that seek to really kind of hold your hand And the way I tell people that they can make their way through our Learn section is almost like you're a student graduating through courses. You can start at the very bottom and go from 0 to 1. You can start with, what is crypto? What is Bitcoin? Then as you start to kind of understand a little more, maybe you want to read, well, what is Ethereum? Then you get down the rabbit hole and now you're reading about DeFi. You've probably heard that term thrown around, decentralized finance. Maybe you start reading about NFTs, and Colin, we can talk about NFTs right now, which are the term of the day and is really exploding. All that is just a long way of saying, we want to cover the news for people who work in this industry and already are experts, but also, and right now equally important, I want to open our arms and welcome the big, huge funnel of people that are curious and want to learn and know nothing and didn't care about this a year ago. And now maybe they've decided, I think I care enough to want to learn something.
Yeah. No, I think the Decrypt Learn section is a wonderful resource. And so I see Jessica is asking some questions on behalf of her 92-year-old father. So
I'd like to hear what Amazon Alexa says when you ask Alexa, what is Bitcoin?
Okay, well, Alexa just gave the typical explanation, but honestly, it's so filled with jargon that it was completely opaque. And that's why I told my dad, he asked me these questions all at dinner. What is cancel culture? What is woke? What is Bitcoin? Words in the news. And it gives me a freaking headache. So I have planted Alexa on the dining table. Yes, I'm in quarantine with a 92-year-old. I planted it on the dining table, and it is very interesting to hear Wiki answering. And I think there's a profound need for your I don't even know what to call it, your media website, because Wiki is totally ridiculous, inadequate, and basic. You can't explain this with other jargon.
So I'll tell you something, Jessica, and maybe this will be helpful. This is what I tell people is kind of just the baseline. But I mentioned earlier to Colin, in some ways, I think cryptocurrency has become a misnomer because some of these digital coins are really not used as currencies. They're not being used as everyday cash. But for better or worse, that's the term. And crypto comes from cryptography, which basically just means, a way of securitizing and ensuring privacy. But I just call them digital assets. And that's how I would describe Bitcoin to someone who knows absolutely nothing and doesn't understand it. I also think in many ways,
it's digital money.
It's a digital asset, sure.
What's the difference between money and an asset?
Well, so sure, it's money. And the use case right now is most people are just buying and holding it as an investment. But in some cases, cryptocurrencies can also represent a whole range of other assets. So we can get into the NFT market, which is exploding right now. But basically, without getting into the jargon, a separate blockchain that isn't Bitcoin was created specifically to allow for tokens to represent deeds to assets. So you could now store the deed to your house on blockchain. You could buy a token, and the token you click and it represents a digital trading card. And to circle back, we recently interviewed Mark Cuban at Decrypt, who's the Dallas Mavericks owner, and he's on Shark Tank. And I actually think he has a pretty good explanation of comparing Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to gold. It's all just about the narrative. And in many ways today, value has gone online. Value has gone digital. So the only reason everyone believes that gold has a certain value is it's a physical hard asset, right? It's gold bars. They know that you can touch it, you can see it, and you can even use it for something. We use gold for jewelry. And for hundreds of years, people have seen value in gold. People who see value in gold in many cases might say, why would Bitcoin have any value? Why should it be worth $60,000? It's nothing. I can't touch it. You just need to kind of get past the mental hurdle of accepting that in many cases now, value is purely digital. Just because you can't physically hold and touch it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so the reason Bitcoin has a certain value is people have bought into its narrative.
Okay, but wait a minute. If we're really going to get into the philosophy of this, and by the way, I am an historian, so I actually do know about the history of gold and also of money, which there's been a number of books about lately. And the thing that is quite mystifying about crypto versus gold is that you can mine gold. And because crypto is anonymous creators of a complex digital thing, people are like, well, can't so-and-so in their garage just make up some more of this?
No. Right.
You see, that's the part of it. Like, I know with mining, you have to have a mine. And you have to, I mean, we understand so that more gold can come on the market than already exists. And it will be the same gold. It won't be any different than the other gold. And with the crypto, you're saying you've already mentioned two different sources, two different exchanges. One that is the coin, which is a slightly different origin, is not the same.
Blockchains, right. Yep.
Okay, about blockchains, it's not the same blockchain. And so where are these things coming from? I mean, yes, of course, it's a narrative. People just accept it. You can accept seashells by the seashore. I mean, you know,
right.
But that is the history of money.
Yeah. Well, and we were once on the gold standard, right? So that's part of it too. I would say that with Bitcoin, you actually can mine it similarly. So you keep using the phrase mine. I mean, without getting too into the techniques, Bitcoin is also mined, and that is how transactions are recorded permanently for everyone to see on the blockchain, which is really just a public ledger. And the way that I've always defined blockchain that I think is helpful for people is to think of it a little bit like the insert at the front of a library book. Although soon enough, Jessica, probably the analogy of a library book won't be very good because libraries, but not the card you use to check out the library book, but the little insert at the front that lists every person who has taken out that book. The Bitcoin blockchain is just a publicly viewable ledger. I think a lot of people don't even realize that they can view it. Anyone can look at it on the Explorer. And what miners do is they upload and record bundles of transaction data to this public, immutable, unchangeable, tamper-proof ledger. And to bring it back to the mining, when those miners do that, they receive a small amount of Bitcoin as a reward. And so another thing people say is, well, wait a minute, then how is the supply capped if new Bitcoins are always being created? The answer is that the supply is capped. It will never go above 21 million coins, which we won't get to for over 100 years. And the amount that miners receive is halved every 4 years to ensure that the cap is maintained and that the supply is limited. But in many ways, it really is like mining gold. Miners receive a small reward, and that's what puts more of it into the market, although the supply is capped. And so again, it's just, I mean.
Let me ask a question for this. I mean, I don't know if this, by the way, I came in the middle and I am going to have to leave early, so I apologize.
Fire away, Jessica.
How do you mine it? Okay, that is what, in other words, when I've heard a lot of news about this, everyone keeps talking about the ledger, but no one is talking about the actual act of mining, which is what it really gets down to.
The answer is, for now, with expensive, large computers that don't look like the computers you and I use, that once you set them up, just go, and are racing with other mining rigs to solve complex computations first. And when they do, and when they win the contract, they're basically winning the right to upload a bundle of transactions to the chain. And then they get a small amount of Bitcoin as a reward. Those computers, and recently more than ever, have raised concerns because of the amount of energy they use, the amount of electricity. Now, everything I just described is on the Bitcoin blockchain. Another thing I warn people is, you used to hear, especially in 2018, when banks would come out and say, oh, we want to use blockchain. You used to hear people say, the blockchain, we'll throw it on the blockchain. It kind of became a funny cliche. It was like in Portlandia when they used to say, put a bird on it, put it on the blockchain. And usually if you just hear someone say the blockchain, that's kind of a good hint they don't know what they're talking about, because there are multiple blockchains. They probably mean the Bitcoin blockchain, which was the first one, but separately, Ethereum is a separate blockchain. And the only reason I bring that up while we're talking about mining is because Ethereum, which currently has its mining work the same way with big, expensive computers that use a lot of electricity, is in the process of trying to transition to a different method for its upkeep, a method that will not require those big, expensive electricity sucking computers. So believers in Ethereum, and by the way, when we talk about NFTs, most of those are built on Ethereum. What they say is just stay tuned, stick around, just wait. It's going to get better in terms of the energy usage once we move from proof of work to proof of stake without getting too technical. So that's how the mining currently works. And in fact, Jessica, we did a story a while back at Yahoo Finance, one of the most memorable stories about a guy who was heating his whole house using his Bitcoin mining rigs, because that's how much heat they give off. I mean, they're whirring, they're loud, they're working away, and they use a lot of electricity. But the hope is that eventually maybe mining can become more environmentally friendly. Right now, it isn't environmentally friendly. The people who are concerned about that are not wrong.
Okay,
Yeah, that was.
Let me just say this. It is totally freaking cool, Dan, that you are in the nascent stages of what is going to be totally huge. I was interviewing a new potential financial advisor was really whacked out on a number of points, but all he said was, okay, now we're adding to classic portfolio allocation.
Right.
We're adding 1 or 2% of Bitcoin. And my ears were really perked up. So that's why I wrote on here, which ETF is that?
Well, and that's another big topic right now in the crypto world. And by the way, I should say that we also have a fellow expert journalist on the line, Robert Hackett, who covers this same exact industry at Fortune. But, you know, as he knows, and as we all know, there is a big moment happening around whether the US will approve a Bitcoin ETF, an exchange traded fund, which basically just a way to get exposure to Bitcoin's price action without having to buy it. I think a lot of people right now, they see what's happening and they want to be in Bitcoin, but they don't want to have to go buy some, right? So Canada has approved a couple Bitcoin ETFs, but the US has not. And everyone's waiting on that. So instead, there have been all these various investment vehicles launched that are kind of workarounds, you know, like the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. They try to give you a way to invest in Bitcoin without you having to go to, say, Coinbase and buy some. Because a lot of people, that's still the hurdle for them. I still think there's a lot of friction there with regular people actually buying some Bitcoin.
Yeah, a lot of what you said goes here and then goes this way. But you know, but I will say that I have heard a lot about the climate change concerns actually around the heat that's generated from Bitcoin servers or machines or whatever we're calling it. And I mean, is that changing? Like now, like, you know, this is a couple of years ago. One of my grad school professors mentioned that there's a lot of concern around that, how the climate change impact around cryptocurrency. And this is a few years ago, so now it's probably even gotten more intense.
Yeah.
What are you hearing about that?
I'll say something on that briefly, and then since we have Robert joining us, maybe he'll chime in too. But I would just say first that I think it's totally fair, and the concerns are apt. And I don't blame people who are currently raving about this. And I do think the backlash has grown louder, especially because of the NFT market. That said, when people talk about Bitcoin's carbon footprint and its environmental impact, many of the comparisons are not apples to apples at all. You know, they compare the environmental impact and the electricity usage of Bitcoin mining to the electricity usage of fiat government currencies, the US dollar, or they compare it to the Visa transaction network, Visa, the credit card company. And, you know, what Bitcoin believers say is, well, yeah, it's a brand new technology and this is how it's mined. And of course, it's going to use more electricity. Or they say, here's how much terawatts it uses. And that amounts to the annual energy usage of a small country. And when you put it in terms like that, well, of course, people say, that's ridiculous. It's too much. But all of this will kind of shake out and we need better comparisons to couch Bitcoin's electricity usage. Robert?
Yeah, Robert, go ahead. Welcome. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for hosting this. And Dan, I'm pretty excited to see what you're doing over at Decrypt. If you wouldn't mind, I'd love to ask a question. I'm sorry to pivot from the environmental concerns of cryptocurrency, but I'm interested in Decrypt launching its own token. I want to know more about it. Maybe you covered this earlier on, and I apologize if you're going to retread.
We didn't
already. Oh, okay, so cool. Yeah, I think it's super cool. I think loyalty programs are something that media companies haven't experimented with enough yet, and Morning Brew seems to be like kind of approaching that with its kind of referral rewards. It's totally not token based, but I don't know. I'm interested to see some kind of innovation in that category. So I saw the Decrypt token and I want to know more about it.
First, what would you say to people who are concerned about Bitcoin's environmental impact?
Oh man, it's so funny. We had Brian Armstrong at a Brainstorm Tech conference in like 2016, 2015.
The Coinbase CEO.
Yeah. And I remember that came up and he was so unhappy to discuss this on the panel. Like you could just tell how angry he was to even have to talk about it.
Right.
But I mean, if you look at things like Ethereum, they're switching to proof of stake. The miners are very resistant. But there are plans in the works to make them less detrimental to the environment. Bitcoin, I don't know. I mean, the standard stock reply I'd say from like the cryptocurrency world is think about all the computers that like every bank in the world runs and compare that to the computers that run Bitcoin. And like, I don't know. It's not like the other stuff is free anyway.
Right. And it's funny, we have a...
So let me just stop you there, Dan. Robert threw out a term that I'm unfamiliar with, proof of stake. What does that mean?
Dan, you want to take it?
Well, so the without getting too technical, the simple way I explain it to people is that without having to use the big, expensive mining equipment and computers, the network will be upkept in a different method. I like to keep it, to keep it in standard generic terms, because we could do another hour on comparing proof of work to proof of stake. But basically the Bitcoin blockchain does proof of work. Ethereum, a separate blockchain, still also does proof of work, but is transitioning to proof of stake, and proof of stake will be supposedly both faster and cleaner. Right?
I guess there's probably an article on your Learn area that I could read more about this.
There is. Now, Robert, I'll address, and Colin was, I think, going to eventually ask me about this, but it's true that just this past week, we launched our own token. And, there's certain baggage that comes with that. We all remember, even I think people who aren't in this industry might remember the big frenzy over ICOs in 2017, the ICO boom. ICO stood for initial coin offering. And it was basically a sudden fundraising method that internet startups discovered, where instead of having to go to venture capital firms in Silicon Valley and pitch them and beg for money, they could just launch a token, their own coin. And they could say to people, buy our token, and later the token will be used in the company, in the ecosystem we're going to build. And the way I described the ICO boom was people were selling chips for a casino that hadn't been built yet. And the ICO boom, then it went bust, because a majority, not all, but a majority of the companies that sold their own tokens, there was no product behind it. And they raised millions of dollars and then they ran away with the money. And the SEC later cracked down on many of them. So fast forward to now, Decrypt, a news site, a journalistic enterprise launching a token, of course we expected and knew there'd be some people say, oh God, another token, or what is this, an ICO? No, this was not a fundraise. This was not us asking readers for money or giving them money, because our token doesn't have monetary value. For now, we see it as just a really cool form of experimentation. And in fact, it's been in beta in a kind of sandbox for many months. But now what happened this past week is it went live. So anyone out there can download our mobile app where you can read all of our daily news articles and earn our reader token. That's how we've been describing it, a reader token. And I think it's really cool. It's very simple. You earn a token for reading an article. You earn a token for sharing one of our articles from our app, texting it to a friend. And the other way you can do it is you earn a token by reacting to an article. So we have fun little, reactions along the bottom. You can say bearish, to the moon, thoughtful, wow, yikes, whatever those reactions are. And there's something very satisfying and tactile. And by the way, one of the things I've been most impressed with at Decrypt is the tech. I mean, the tech team is terrific. Our app is beautiful. The UX is very good. So for now, you might ask, well, what's the point of having the token? Well, first of all, it's a cool way to learn about crypto, right? I mean, we're actively participating now in the industry we cover. We cover decentralized tech. Now we're actually using decentralized tech. Eventually, you'll be able to redeem the tokens for some kind of cool digital reward. You can think about artwork. You could think about Decrypt swag, but it won't be exchangeable for other cryptocurrencies or for money. That's the idea. So this isn't an ICO. We don't have to worry about, regulation and compliance. It's a fun way of using the tech we cover. And, Robert, I don't know about you, the thing that first appealed to me way back when I first wrote about Bitcoin in 2011 and 2012, I thought one of the cool potential use cases, one of the earliest promises of cryptocurrency was the potential to use it to fund online content, micropayments, frictionless micropayments, especially what if we can get around the terrible kind of slow nature and thorny nature of paywalls? Like, you want people to pay for journalism. We all do. What if we write a big, great investigative feature and we want to put it behind the paywall? But then when people see that horrible pop-up that says, enter your credit card, enter your address, enter your email, confirm your subscription, it's like, what if we could get to a point where you could just instantly, with the click of a button, pay per article with half of a token? And then it feels like just, an impulse purchase at the checkout line. So that's what's exciting to me, is using this stuff eventually to get out of this terrible kind of hole we're in, where we're beholden to these walled gardens, Facebook, Google, banner ads, crappy pop-up video ads that fill the whole screen and block the article. So those are kind of the pie in the sky use cases, but for now it's just a cool thing that we're playing with.
No, it is cool. And I downloaded the app the other day and I did get my wallet set up. I know I messaged you a couple of times on that, but I did get it set up. So yeah, I'm going to be learning more. So, because I'm you guys are experts. I'm a complete, I know a little bit about it just from the headlines and like consumer articles and whatnot. But so let me get another couple of questions in, just to bring it way down. So for everyone who's listening, if I want to get started and more interested in, I'm getting more interested in crypto, there's the app, great. How can I get started? And so like, if I want to buy a Bitcoin, how do I even do that?
Good question. And in fact, I recently did a fun Bitcoin 101 for my parents and their friends on their Saturday night happy hour Zoom. And a lot of the questions you hear from people of a certain age about this stuff are so basic that it's a reminder not to assume kind of any base level in terms of the tech. I do think that for a lot of people out there in the world who've seen headlines about Bitcoin, it can be so intimidating even to just get started. Well, okay, I'm convinced. People are saying that it's a worthwhile investment. How do I even buy some? Do I call my broker? In most cases, no. Although we're also seeing more and more traditional Wall Street investment firms buying Bitcoin.
You just heard from Jessica, her financial advisor is recommending.
So maybe you can call your broker. But the answer is that there are a number of exchanges out there. Robert and I mentioned Coinbase. What they've done so well, I think, and they weren't, they're not the only one, but I think they did a very good job of branding themselves as the mainstream easiest option. And that's why the brand is so strong. That company is about to go public, by the way. I have a feeling the stock will do very, very, very well. I think for the average person, if they've heard of any Bitcoin exchanges at all, Coinbase is the one they've heard of. Although even that, probably their name recognition, it's nowhere near Amazon, Uber, Airbnb, that kind of stuff.
So I would just go to the Coinbase website, register, set up an account.
Yeah, and they make it pretty easy. I don't want to say completely easy. You have to prove your identity. You've got to take a photo of your driver's license. Then you would deposit some money, and then you could buy some Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. Now, here's where it gets interesting. For most people, that's it. And you would just let Coinbase hold or be the custodian of your crypto funds. And for most people, that's fine. The company's got millions of users. You can probably trust them, fine. What purists will tell you, people who've been in this space since the beginning, who are kind of the real believers, will say, I don't want to trust my keys, which basically are your access codes, to Coinbase. So what they'll do is they might still buy through Coinbase, but then they'll move their holdings off Coinbase to be more secure. But look, for the average person, you don't need to worry about it. It's fine. All that said, even though I'm saying that I think Coinbase has done a good job of being the mainstream go-to place, there's still some friction there. there's still a few steps, and there's still people looking, well, what are these things? And they've got the tickers, BTC, ETH, BCH, LTC. And you're saying, what? And that, I think, is why some of the investment vehicles that give people exposure to Bitcoin without making you buy some have been so successful and appealing. I think a lot of people out there, even if they've become convinced, all right, I think I should invest in this, they're never going to actually buy some. They'd rather buy into, say, a Bitcoin ETF, which is why there's so much agita right now in anticipation of, will the SEC finally approve one? That's what most people, that's good enough for them. They want to invest in a vehicle that will give them exposure without having to buy Bitcoin. And it doesn't help when you see headlines like the one 3 months ago that kind of went viral from the New York Times, which was a great story idea. I think Robert would agree that the rest of us kind of kicked ourselves because we thought, well, yeah, we all know this. Why didn't we write this up? And the story was, meet people who have lost access to their Bitcoin. Oh man, they would have millions, but they've lost their passwords. And the average person saw that and they went, oh man, that's possible? Well, forget it. It's too risky. Now, of course, maybe the story could have done a better job of explaining, you don't have to be the custodian of your own keys. You could just buy on Coinbase, leave it on Coinbase. But I do think it led a lot of regular people to say, well, I'm staying out of it then. It's too scary. What if I lose my passwords? But those kind of stories lead people to be intimidated to buy crypto.
So I really have two questions. I know we're running out of time, but two more. We'll just go to two more questions. So this has been awesome, though. I've learned a lot. So what the hell is an NFT? Explain this.
Okay. This is good practice for me. I've been discussing this a lot recently. On Monday, I'm doing an NPR panel about this. Everyone wants to know about this right now. NFTs, NFTs, NFTs. I'll give you the actual explanation, but I also think people don't necessarily need to understand the technicalities of it. But NFT stands for non-fungible token. When we say it's non-fungible, if I give you, Colin, a US dollar, and you give me a different dollar from your wallet, I still have a dollar. Same with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not non-fungible. If I send someone a Bitcoin and then a week later someone else sends me a Bitcoin, I still have one Bitcoin, even though it was different Bitcoins. They're non-fungible because supposedly, the proposition goes, your NFT, which is quite literally a token that exists on blockchain, is provably, verifiably scarce, one of a kind, either one of a limited batch, or in some cases, one of one. So what they are is, like other cryptocurrencies, they are tokens, but these tokens are smart contracts that basically exist to represent an asset. So an NFT could represent an artwork, a visual artwork online. It could represent a digital baseball card. It could represent, in the case of Top Shot, which is one NFT marketplace, a NBA video highlight clip. Fine. There are multiple NFT marketplaces. And I also think that even though right now everyone talks about NFTs as one big umbrella, it really varies in terms of their value and what they're doing. You have to kind of ask, well, what sector are we talking about? Artists are now putting their records out as NFTs. That's a different kind of thing than NBA clips. But the best way to zoom in on all this is with Top Shot, NBA Top Shot, which has become kind of the most popular NFT platform. People on Top Shot are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to own digital video clips of, say, a LeBron James dunk. And what people say to that is, well, wait a minute, I can see that same clip on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. And yes, you can. And what the believers in NFTs say is, well, sure, but I can Google a photo of the Mona Lisa. That doesn't mean I own it. With Top Shot, I own that clip. Fine. But now we've seen the backlash where it's like, well, what do you really own? What can you do with your video clip? You could display it by tweeting it, or you could sell it for more money. That's about it. You don't own much, but that is the NFT market right now. Some people see a real red flag. Some people see a bubble.
So NBA, they have copyright over that footage though, don't they?
Yes. And you can bet that the NBA, even though it has backed and given its imprimatur on Top Shot, is not giving buyers of Top Shots copyright to, say, broadcast the Top Shot. We've all heard when you watch an NBA game and it says, this telecast is the express trademark and copyright of the NBA, and you cannot rebroadcast it without our express written permission. So I don't know if the majority of people buying Top Shots understand that they don't really own that much, but many of them would probably not care. They just think it's cool and fun.
So I know we could talk way more about this stuff, but for anyone else, who might be interested in covering or creating journalism around this stuff, what are some?
I'm glad you asked this.
Yeah. So so what are some key things to know?
Okay.
If you want to get into crypto journalism.
Okay. Good to ask. I'm sure Robert would agree. And Robert, one of the other people doing terrific coverage that is honest, ethical, smart, interesting. But we would probably both tell you to take heed, because although there are scammers all over the world in all kinds of industries, you tend to see a higher concentration of them in this industry. There are companies out there that will pitch you and say, look at what we made, and actually there's not much there. It's fairy dust. Similarly, I think there's too much shilling in the space, not just by some journalists who cover it, but also by investors, also by people who work at crypto companies. There's a lot of self-fulfilling stuff where they pump it. They tweet out, to the moon, and then other people retweet it. And the price of an altcoin, or some people call them shit coins, goes up because of their tweets. So just beware. I tend to think that even more so than when you're covering Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, there are a lot of snake oil salesmen in this space. That's not Bitcoin's fault. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin is a fraud or a scam, something you used to see skeptics scream about a lot. But there are a lot of fraudsters in this industry. So when you're covering news about this space, you have to really know and trust and verify. There's that old Reaganism, trust, but verify. But I would apply it to crypto and say, distrust and verify. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that it's really interesting. It's the bleeding edge. There's a lot of interesting, cool, smart people that have bought in, but you also need to be careful when you're quoting people, talking about various companies. There's a lot out there that is misleading and incorrect, and it's ever changing. And my other favorite quick spiel is to not believe anyone when you talk about price who purports to know what's going to happen next with the price. You have people who go on CNBC and they say, Bitcoin could go to 100,000. Well, sure, but it could also sink in a week back to 30,000. Those things strike me as equally possible. So don't believe anyone who says they know what's going to happen next with the price, because it fluctuates.
So be perhaps more skeptical when you're diving into these topics than perhaps other areas.
I think so, but that's not to warn anyone off. It's a really, really interesting and cool and exciting space right now.
No, it's hot, and there's headlines, major headlines every day about it, which is probably exciting for you guys at Decrypt, and
sometimes exhausting.
I'm sure. No, I'm sure that you're not bored.
At the very least, this might be a good way to sign off, but at the very least, what I like to say, Colin, now is that, people can be skeptics, fine. People can dismiss it, fine. But at the very least, I think more people than ever acknowledge Bitcoin is something that exists and will continue to exist. It's here and it's real. It's not going to collapse tomorrow. You used to hear people say, well, what if it goes to zero? It has never gone to zero since it started. It's not going to suddenly go to zero. But the price can fluctuate and will.
This is great. So I'll just open it up to the few people we have on. If anyone else has any questions for Dan on anything, really.
I guess I would what is it like to be the editor-in-chief? What type of activities do you do?
Well, thank you for asking. Especially at a startup right now, it's a lot of different things. I remember asking before I joined, I asked our CEO who hired me, who also comes from a traditional kind of print mag background, Time Magazine, and some other places. I asked him, what do you imagine the job will entail? And he listed some things. Those things have been part of it, but then there have been a lot of other things too that I didn't even think of. There's managing a team of 14 people. There's sometimes editing a feature, sometimes putting out small fires when we realize that something we put up had something incorrect in it. Because as I mentioned, there are reports that go out in this industry sometimes that everyone scrambles to cover because it's a great headline, and then something's incorrect in it. The other day, Deutsche Bank put out a report that everyone latched onto, where Deutsche Bank said, you know, Bitcoin is now too important to ignore. Everyone said, wow, Bitcoin's too important to ignore. But then they had some charts in there that completely omitted a couple large global currencies. It's like, wait a minute, why did they leave those out? So there's a lot of things you have to be careful about in this space when you rush to cover daily news. In addition, you know, Decrypt previously hadn't done any video. And now that I've arrived, we're starting to really do some video when we get big guest interviews. So going from 0 to 1 with video. So it's everything. The team there is terrific. And now we're just really trying to take it to the next level. So I don't know if I really specifically answered your question, but it's a lot of things every day. You know, it's a lot of slacks at all hours, especially for us with a very global team. You know, when I wake up and go to the computer at 7 a.m., it's already noon for our UK team, and half of our staff is in the UK. So half their day is over, and there have been a lot of daily news stories that went up while I was sleeping. So I take a look through those and try to make sure everything's good and tight. Then I look at what we're assigning for the rest of the day. It's fast-paced and exciting, but it's very different from what an EIC job would be at a print magazine.
Great. Yeah.
I have a question too. In the beginning, you were talking about the difference between traditional media, like Fortune and whatever. And I come from a long traditional media background and was with the Time Machine and all that stuff, and an editor for one of their publications for a long time ago. Anyway, I think, and I'm asking the difference now, one of the problems I always encountered, and I also did a syndicated column in traditional papers for a long time, we were over what I call over lawyered all the time because everybody was afraid of lawsuits. And if there was ever a question, you didn't go with it, or you didn't break the story, or it would, you know, it would get spiked, whatever. Even though we knew it to be true, and a lot of this stuff never has gotten out after years. I mean, is the difference on a startup, which is obviously electronically based, instead of lawyers, it's more the court of public opinion where something can go viral if it's wrong instantly, rather than the legal part of it, liability?
Karen, it's a really good question. I mean, there's so much there, right? And I remember having been 5.5 years at Fortune, when you're working on a cover story, a feature, just how careful everything would have to be and how lawyered. You're right. You know, I think everyone in the digital era is dealing with balancing speed with accuracy and quality. And even,
but isn't that the old Dan Rather thing? Would you rather be right or be first? You know.
So I always say that. I always say I'd rather be right, but the ideal is to be first and right. You know. Or what I like to tell my staff is I say, I don't mind if we're not first, if we're best. So, you know, when someone else breaks a story, I'm good with us taking until the next day to get our story up if our story moves the story further, adds original reporting, adds value, does something to strengthen it. But if we're just writing a short, quick breaking news post and we're not going to try to add original reporting, well, then you better move fast and you better get that up. So I think everyone's dealing with that, not just digital only publications, but print publications that now finally recognize that their website is really important, and actually, frankly, probably more important than the print product. And that took years for places to embrace. I mean, maybe Robert has a comment there, but I often felt like at Fortune, with respect to Fortune, they still hadn't finally admitted it to themselves that the website is as important as the fancy, beautiful, glossy print magazine. So, you know, you're right that if you quickly scramble to cover something breaking and there's something wrong, you're going to know right away now, thanks to social media, which is in many ways a wonderful thing. It's useful, but boy, you need to be careful also.
Yeah, I encountered the same at the Daily News as far as the print product versus the web. But it always came down to the ad dollars, you know? What can
money anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, what can sustain a newsroom? You know, how do you do that? How do you do it with just a website? I don't think anyone has truly figured that out yet. At least not a robust newsroom, you know. And so, I mean, maybe the Times has. They're one of the few success stories out there. But again, you know, it's a constant struggle in legacy publications, I'd say, for sure. What has more priority for the team, you know? Anyway, so this has been really awesome. I really appreciate you. We're a little over time, but hopefully everyone found this informative, useful. We did record it, which I think was great, and we can get it up on the Deadline Club YouTube.
Great.
And if no one has anything else, I'll say to wish everyone a happy Saturday.
Same to you. And thank you very much, because you really kind of simplified and explained a little bit more about cryptocurrency.
Thanks, Karen.
It's
That's
not
the
just
idea.
something really far out there.
Thank you. That's the idea. And thanks, Colin, for the idea. More Deadline Cafes to come. Thank you all. And thanks, Robert, for joining us. That was fun to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.
Have a great day.